change is only hard for the unprepared. Change is exciting if the change that you're moving to is way better than the way that you're currently working.
Any sectors, any employers that do not prioritize employee well-being and mental health in the crazy times that we're in, they're going to become obsolete. They're not going to be able to hire. Nobody will stay with them. They're going to leach out.
We need to not abdicate to the AICPA the job of making accounting exciting for everyone. We need to do it ourselves because there's no profession like this.
Hi, it's Rob Brown here with the Accounting Influencers podcast, continuing a series of international panels with people that care about and serve in the accounting profession. We are talking about where we're at right now with this wonderful game and the direction of travel. I'm going to get the panelists to introduce themselves in just a moment. We have cast the net over hundreds of influencers, leaders, and experts in the accounting world from all corners of the globe, and we're bringing 4 esteemed guests to you on this panel that will share with you their best thinking on where we're at and where we are going. So without further ado, let's get started. Randy Crabtree, you're an old friend of the show. Lovely to have you with us. A quick intro, sir, please.
Sure, and thanks for having me here, Rob. Randy Crabtree, I'm founder of Trimerit Specialty Tax Professionals, host of the Unique CPA podcast, host of the Bridging the Gap conference, and if I can let my ego show through for a second, recently named one of the top 100 most influential people in accounting.
Nice to blow your own trumpet, Randy. It's nice when you can do that. Philip Whitman, nice to have you with us, sir.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm Phil Whitman, CEO of Whitman Transition Advisors. We're the single largest advisory firm for CPA firms in the nation. Also the executive chairman of the C-Suite Impact Group of Companies, which was designed to help the small firm that wanted to remain independent. Like my friend Randy Crabtree, I'm pleased to have been, for the second year running, top 100 most influential person in accounting. Thank you for having me, Rob.
Well, Mark, by way of diversity, you're ticking a box for us because we've got a North American panel here and you are representing the United Kingdom. So lovely to have you with us.
Well, nice to know I'm ticking a box for you, Rob. That's objective number 1 achieved. Yeah, great to be here. I'm Mark Edmondson, founder and CEO of Inflow. At Inflow, we're looking to increase the relevance of the audit services that are performed by accounting firms through leveraging advanced technology and our team's expertise in innovation. Really good to be part of this conversation. I'm not one of the top 100 influencers, but I was named on a recent 20 under 40 influencers list. So I don't know how these lists all get compared to each other, but it's great to be part of the club.
Okay, that's wonderful. Anthony Pugliese, great to have you with us. A quick intro from you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I'm Anthony Pugliese. I'm the global president of the Institute of Internal Auditors. I'm a CPA. I'm also a certified internal auditor. My background includes 21 years at the American Institute of CPAs as a chief operating officer and the CEO of the California Society of CPAs. And only because I'm a competitive guy, I've been named 7 times as one of the most influential accountants. So there you go. I got in a plug.
I'm feeling a little bit left out that I run a podcast called Accounting Influencers and a community called the Accounting Influencers Roundtable, but I've not been named in any influencer groups. So that's why I've got you guys with me. It's lovely to have you with us. We're going to
I think, Rob, I think all we need to do is agree that the 4 of us, we put your name and sort of recognize you. And I'm sure with something like that, they'll reach out to you and you'll end up on that list as well.
There you go. I like to think of myself as the influencer of influencers. So
you're the influencer maker.
Let's leave it at that. Mark, I'm going to start with you on this one. We're in crazy times right now. There is absolutely no doubt with the accounting world and the software ecosystem that surrounds it. How equipped do you feel we are as a profession to deal with the sheer pace of change that's coming at us?
It's a really interesting question, Rob, and I think that candidly, we're struggling at the moment. A lot of firms are struggling with the headwinds that are present. When we think about staffing and talent shortages that we have in the market, we've got a problem. We have a problem with an aging demographic of CPAs, particularly in the US. And against that, we have some of the quite impactful changes that are going on right now around influx of private equity investment in the profession and other areas. So we've got a lot of change, and we've got a lot of firms that are not used to an environment of such volatility. We've got leaders in accounting firms who've not seen this level of change before, and are maybe not set up to be as agile and as dynamic as we're going to need. This is going to really put a lot of pressure on things like the partnership model, for example. Is it agile enough to make the right decisions in these times where generative AI and other technologies are advancing? So I would like to think there's a heck of a lot of opportunity here, and I really like to focus on that side of the ledger. But to answer your question directly, I think that there's some real serious headwinds that firms are facing right now and need to really look heavily at to address.
Yeah. Randy, you've been in this game a long time. What kind of ship do you feel we're in to buffet the storms?
First, thanks for calling me old. I appreciate it. And so I think I'm an internal optimist. I think I see that if I look at the pandemic and see how nimble and reactive, which we have to do more than be reactive, but how nimble we were and how quickly we were there to help our clients. And we were, as a profession, no matter where we were in the world, we were equipped or charged with helping our clients get through what was going on. So from that standpoint, I think we are well equipped. And as Mark said, I just don't think we are thinking that is proactive as we should. And I think from that standpoint, we need to think a lot more proactive with, technology for sure. I'm sure Mark agrees with that, and probably everybody, but technology for sure. The lack of people coming in, again, being an optimist, I honestly see that that's going to change. I think the perception of the profession is changing. The way we look at things, it's not just sitting at your desk 24 hours a day pumping out tax returns. I think people are going to start to see that we are more, partners with clients and working on success. And so I think we're equipped. We have really smart people in this profession. We need more of them to come in. I honestly think that's going to happen, but it's only going to happen if we up the perception of what happens in our profession.
Yeah. Well, my next question, I'm going to be asking you what you feel is the biggest threat or challenge to what we're dealing with. Anthony, you're in a wonderfully privileged position to oversee the whole of the profession in what you do. What kind of shape do you feel we're in dealing with what's happening?
Yeah, and for those that didn't know, 80% of our membership, which is 250,000 people around the world, are from an accounting background. 50% in the US hold an active CPA license. I'm sort of with Randy on the optimism. However, I think a lot of the areas, I call them human intelligence skills, the things like teamwork, collaboration, especially in times of technology change, are going to become more and more important. In fact, our organization recently overhauled and reissued our internal auditing standards because we felt there was a greater need, also, as Randy said, to up the game by requiring internal auditors to more proactively communicate with boards, C-suite executives, audit committees, to start speaking about some of the risks that come with the opportunities we're seeing on the technology front. So I think we have a lot of opportunity, but we're going to have to grow into some of these human intelligence skills and technology skills. And right now, even the examination process in the US and around the world for chartered accountants doesn't quite cover the gamut of technology that new entrants into the profession are facing. So there's a lot of upskilling needed for us to meet this challenge, and I think we can do it.
That's well observed, Anthony. What has come out on these panels is the fight for relevance for accounting, and how relevant are the accounting qualifications and examinations, how relevant are the governing bodies and institutes, and the various networks and associations. So we might touch on that a little bit more. Philip, there's a consensus here that the times are good, but there are some rainy storm clouds ahead, perhaps.
So as I listen to the other panelists, I think Randy's absolutely right. We've been a very reactive profession. And if you look at all the scandals, whether it was Madoff or Enron or, the downturn with the real estate in 2008, our profession was very reactionary and more opportunities were created around those terrible events. I think we're now in a period where we're seeing a significant amount of proactivity with changes in technology. Companies like, Blackor AI that can actually complete a tax return without any human intervention. Companies like Tax Titans that's created a marketplace for CPAs and people that need those tax returns. I think the biggest challenge is not that there aren't the answers out there. I always say there's no, there's no NO. There's only how. And when we look at those solutions that are out there, the challenge is that most CPA firms, it's like follow the leader. So you look at what's going on with the new governance, the new investors that have come into the profession, and it started with one or two, and now it's rampant, and it's no longer just available for the largest of firms. We see small firms, and there are organizations out there that are providing the much needed capital. There are actually private equity groups that are coming and they're saying, we not only have capital, but we are bringing AI in, and so much of the day-to-day that you're doing is going to be done by, I think, as Mark had alluded to, obviously we all know the greatest challenge the profession faces is in the talent shortage. And, I believe that outsourcing or offshoring, it's no longer optional. It's not, okay, we're not just doing it because we're going to save costs and increase margins. We're doing it because there just aren't the people out there. And I think as a profession, we need to do a much better job taking the accounting profession and making it sexy again. And I think after every one of those events, whether it was Madoff, whether it was Enron, whether it was the downturn in 2008, there was always a little bit of an uptick in enrollment. And I think we need to talk about our profession as one that, hey, we're on the cutting edge of technology, and the opportunity, is just as good as someone going to, Wall Street and going into the investment banking arena. And we're seeing salaries coming up. So I think the cup is starting to overflow with the opportunities. And I think it was Randy being the eternal optimist. I'm in the same camp.
We got it. Thank you. Let's focus on one threat, gentlemen. Anthony, I'll start with you on this one. There are so many things going on. You could hit private equity. You could hit regulation change. You could hit qualifications, governing bodies, talent, anything you like. But if you were to pick out one single big issue or challenge that might slow down progress or negatively impact accountants, what would you say that was, Anthony?
It's interesting. It affects the internal audit profession, the external audit profession equally. There's been a huge shift from assurance on financial statements and all things related to financial statements to an environment now where non-financial data has as much importance or sometimes more importance, depending on who the investor is or who the investor groups are. That shifting into the ability to provide assurance on non-financial data has become, it's become critical. You could take ESG as one example. I know that's yet to hit the US in a huge wave, but with the recent SEC disclosure requirements, I'm sure that will land somewhere after the debate is finished. But understanding that we have an opportunity to migrate into or evolve, better word, to evolve the profession into providing assurance on issues that impact capital markets just as much as financial statements and related disclosures go. ESG, various forms of technology, AI. I don't know when we'll be ready to provide assurance on AI, but the day is coming. So I think that's a seismic shift for us because that's where clients are going. I think that's where our employers of internal auditors are going is, help me with this AI stuff, help me with this ESG stuff. And we have to be ready for that. And I fear that we're not quite ready enough because the challenge is here now. And certainly on ESG, that's the rest of the world, especially Europe, is way ahead. So the accountants working there are going to have to stay on top of those developments as they continue to evolve. Second would be legislation, but that's another topic.
Well, it's the whole can of worms, as we say. Mark, you're intimately involved in audit within Flow, so you understand a lot of what Anthony's saying there. What do you feel is the big hurdle we've got to overcome?
I think Anthony touches on it there with nice context around relevance, really, and you said that that's come up on other podcasts, Rob. But so maybe if I shift gears and don't try and emphasize that too much, I like to talk about the profession has two very ingrained concepts from the space that I really focus on, as you mentioned, audit, and those are that everybody that gets brought into audit gets trained to be skeptical about everything. It's an inherent requirement is be professionally skeptical. And the other very endemic, functional piece is around creative accountants generally end up serving jail time. And those two concepts around we need to be skeptical about everything and we need to, creative is a negative connotation, as something that I find quite fascinating when we're in a world now where we need to be quite agile, dynamic, responsive to some of these big fundamental shifts. And so as we think about technology, everybody's defaulting to being very skeptical about what generative AI could do. And that might be appropriate, but it might be inhibiting our ability to adopt it as a profession. If we need to think about increasing our relevance and really rethinking what an accountant is, we're going to need creativity. So I like to think about some of those really fundamental pillars, if you like, of what CPAs, what accountants are, and think about those are the mindsets that we've had drilled into this profession for quite some time now. We're going to have to shift some gears here if we're going to think about our future relevance in a slightly different way.
And the gear shift may well come in the generational change, because 75% of accountants are now at or close to retirement age. And the onus is on the new generation coming through who are a lot more tech savvy to maybe drive that change. Philip, if you were to land on one big issue that's going to slow things down, what would you go with?
So the answer I'm going to give you, you're probably going to be a little bit surprised at. I think the biggest issue or challenge that negatively affects us as a profession, and this is very much in alignment with Mark just said, I believe it's the fearful mindset of the CPA. I believe that, yes, talent is a challenge and technology is a challenge, but it's the fearful mindset of, oh, you know what? I shouldn't get involved in wealth management because if the market goes down, I might lose a client. Oh, I'm not going to do offshoring because my clients are going to come to me and they're going to ask me for a discount. I'm not going to raise my fees. Although if you think about it, right now, being a CPA is getting more and more valuable because there are fewer of us, as you said, 75% eligible to retire. I really think it's the mindset of the mainstream CPA that's, has their blinders on. And, look, this of those CPAs, I think in the US, the AICPA, 45,000 firms, 35,000 sole practitioners. I walk in a room and I talk to them about, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and I get blank stares. It's like an ostrich with the head in the ground, and it's the fear of, if I don't know it, I ain't touching it, I ain't doing it. Yeah. And I think you need so many more of these younger progressive CPAs, the next gens, the millennials coming up through the ranks, because they don't have that fearful mindset.
Yeah. And Randy, I'm wondering if this negative mindset Phil's talking about, it speaks to complacency. Accountants is doing really well, thank you. Everyone needs audit, everyone needs an accountant. Most accounting firms have grown during the pandemic significantly. They're making more money than ever, practically recession-proof. So why should accountants fear anything or need to change anything? What do you think is the big threat?
Oh, I agree with what we're saying here. And mindset is a thing that just kept coming into my mind as we were talking about this. And it's around what everybody else said, but it's also around the mindset of what you just said, Rob. We're doing well. Why should we worry about it? And the mindset of, as accountants, we're trained consistency is good. We're trained, same as last year's good, when it's not, when it comes to your business itself. If it's always the Sally method, same as last year, it is we're going to keep working 80 hours a week, like that perception that I want to get rid of, and we're going to stick to our desk, and we're going to be complacent because, hey, yeah, no, I'm making $500,000 a year, I'm making 700 grand a year, whatever the numbers are. They could be crazy. I mean, $1 million a year. I mean, accountants can do very well, but we get complacent in that mindset of two things. One, we're trained consistency, we're trained following rules. And so, like Mark said, or other people have said, we're not always that, Mark said, that creative thinker. How do we run our business better? How do we be more efficient? How do we start to get the work, mythical work-life balance, which is not mythical. We just sometimes think it is. It's us being, going back to what we said before, being more proactive, more innovative, looking at our firm as a business rather than we're just there helping clients. That's what we do. We help clients rather than looking at ourselves. So it's it's an internal risk, internal threat is what I see, is we're just not as, we have the ability to be more creative. We're, I think, hamstrung by traditionally the way we're supposed to think.
I think you hit on something, Randy, and that's most CPAs and CPA firms, they work in their business and not on their business.
Yep.
And I think working on the business is so important, because look at Kodak, right? Who didn't have Kodak film in their camera? And you know what? It was business as usual. Where are they today? With digital cameras, and, they should have been on the forefront and the leader in that, and they weren't.
They invented it and then they ignored it. Yep.
Well, let's look at the accountants as individuals. Mark, let's come back to you on this one. If we look at and this is just a quick round, fellas, what skills and attributes do accountants need to stay competitive and relevant? We've hinted at a few already, but what would you go with there, Mark?
Big focus for us on education is really at the grassroots level. And so that really dovetails nicely with making the profession as an attractive career choice for people earlier on. To build on Anthony's point earlier on, we actually worked with the ICAW here in the UK to embed our own software in the ACA exam over here, the CPA exam, effectively. And so we're really focused on some of those skills around technology, Rob. So things like interpretation, ability to explain, some of the kind of analysis type skills around how do you wield the technology and focus what humans are doing on the things that technology can't do. So that's a real focus for us. And I think that people would be wise to think about not competing with technology and AI and starting to think about where do we need to advance the skills that are going to complement that and really harness it.
Yeah. What about you, Phil? Key skill or attribute? You're going to land on mindset, are you? Or have you got anything else?
No, I think it's entrepreneurship. I think, they have to learn how to really, truly be business people and not cogs in a wheel that are just pumping out compliance work.
Yeah. Anthony, what about you?
Everything that's been said has been fantastic. Communication skills are one thing where I know the profession seems to need a good bit of improvement. Like, consultants do well because they're able to communicate. They're able to provide information. Sometimes they perceive the information that's needed, and that's not a skill everyone possesses. And it's one that can be acquired through training. Some people are lucky enough to be born with it. But communication skills are going to be key, especially when we're in a complex environment, trying to explain things like AI in a way that's understandable to board, C-suite executives, clients, whoever. But also the other human intelligence skills around collaboration, which, it's easy for us to collaborate with other accountants. I don't know if anyone's ever done pension audits and had to use an actuary. Those are not always fundamental skills that accountants bring to the table on how to collaborate. And I think that's going to be more important, right, as teams. And now we have algorithm auditors. That's certainly not mainstream for the CPA world or the CA world. But that ability to collaborate and bring teams together and communicate effectively is extraordinarily critical, especially around, I mention AI constantly, but ESG, cyber is becoming more and more complex with AI. That requires the ability to distill a lot of complex information into some far easier ways of understanding it to people who aren't going to be experts, but are still in charge through governance roles. So I think I might be repeating a little bit of what's been said, but communication, collaboration, the human intelligence skills that we aren't trained on necessarily through current curriculum.
And to that point, Anthony, I'm not sure we attract those kind of people into the profession. If you look at what accounting is essentially, we attract very risk-averse, safe people. If I'm putting them in a box, maybe introverted, maybe not exuberant in those people skills that are required. But this is a different world, and absolutely to stay relevant and competitive and start to narrate the stories behind the numbers, we may well need to ask that of our upcoming generation of accountants. Randy, what key skill attribute jumps out for you that's going to be required?
Yeah, I think basically what everybody else said. We didn't talk about really your technical tax and accounting and audit skills, because honestly, those are a commodity. You're really not going to be any better than anybody else when it comes to that. Maybe you have a little more, passion for a certain part of tax. You'll have that. So I think it's what everybody else is saying. It's the soft skills. It's communications one I had. So Anthony, I completely agree with you on that, especially as we keep evolving to this advisory role. We need to be able to communicate what it is we are doing to help clients. But I think a lot of it, I think internally a lot. And so for me, it's leadership skills internally. And I am a huge proponent of vulnerability and empathy, and having vulnerability and sharing, if you've struggled with something, having that skill to be able to do it, I think is great. And then being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, especially if you're a leader, and having empathy for what they're going through, and not just, okay, you didn't get this done, so you have to work an extra 10 hours this week. Let's figure out why. Let's figure out ways we could do this better. And then that comes to what Mark said too. Creativity is so important to get through those.
A common theme throughout these has been that the accountant of today is so much more than the accountant of yesterday. For example, the technology skills that an accountant needs these days is much more than knowing how to turn a computer on and off. There's some speak now of accountants needed to learn Python and write code, and the whole AI prompt engineering that's coming up. And now we're talking here about leadership and soft skills and empathy and everything else. And if we're going to attract a generation into accounting as a profession, they've got to be the real deal and complete deal, whether or not we train them in all of that stuff. So it does speak to the brand of the profession. Gentlemen, I want to give you an opportunity to just right some wrongs. And Phil, I'll start with you on this one. If there's one myth that needs busting, or one bit of faulty thinking you think is out there, or fake news that's holding the accounting profession back, what would you land on?
So I don't necessarily think that it's a fake news or long-standing myth, because I think in the past it was absolutely true. People think of accountants, whether it was your father that was an accountant or someone that that you're working all these crazy long hours. And if you go to the Big Four, you're working 80, 90, 100 hours a week. But the reality is the middle market CPA firms have rolled out the red carpet for their people. And never before has there been a better quality of life for people in public accounting. Rob, if you only want to work 37 and a half hours during busy season, and you can only work 20 hours outside of busy season, you know what, buddy? You got it, because you're great and we want you. I mean, it's customized, and we need to get that message out. And we frequently see people that say they go to the Big Four and they leave. They never even give the middle market firms a chance, because they think this is what public accounting is about. And it couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. And part of the challenge is the professors in the university know they can't go wrong by saying, you should go to Price Waterhouse, you should go to, KPMG, you go to a Big Four firm, you're going to get great experience. Yes, that's true. But they need to have a caveat that you're going to bust your butt for, 2 or 3 years getting that experience. But there's a whole nother world. There's life after the Big Four. And I think that's a myth, that public accounting is what you experienced if you started in the Big Four.
And more to that point, Phil, we've got editors that can make me look great there, so don't worry. It's more to the point, Phil, it becomes talk of failure if you don't get into a Big Four firm, because that is the pinnacle, isn't it? And the Big Four cream off the top talent. But yeah, that's certainly a myth that needs busting. Randy, over to you. Any myths or fake thinking you want to correct right here?
Yeah, so I'm going to go from the tax standpoint of the profession. I can't talk to audit, and Mark and Anthony, you may say that this is impossible, but for me, one of the biggest myths, and it's been there forever, is we have to sell our time. That is the way that we become something in this profession. And what that happens is I work more because I can make more if I work more hours put in. I look better. Look at my boss. I put 80 hours in this week. So now I look great. And now we can bill more, and look how much revenue I brought in. If there's any way to do it, and again, I can't talk to audit. I think you probably can. And tax, I think, believe me, you can show the outcomes. You can sell a value. You can base it on what you're delivering, from an outcome standpoint, not what you're delivering from the time you put into it. So for me, the myth that we have to sell our time. Rob, you've heard me talk before. I talk about burnout in the profession and mental health. I think the billable hour is what creates the burnout and what creates the negative impact to our profession. So that's the myth I want to get rid of.
And I don't know where Mark and Anthony will go. Anthony, I'll come to you next. But there are less and less auditors doing more and more audits, and burnout and mental health are definitely at a premium. And I don't know how you can value price and audit. You might have some thoughts, but any faulty thinking, Anthony, that you'd correct right now?
Yeah, it certainly goes to internal and external audit. We recently, the IIA launched a pretty ambitious project. We call it Vision 2035. What will our profession look like in that year?
Right.
Knowing everything we know now and looking at trends and so forth. And as we talk to who we call, stakeholders, boards, audit committees, even senior management, there is a firmly held belief that accountants sit firmly in the compliance space. Whether it's financial statement compliance or financial statement auditing, it's pervasive. So, and that comment probably doesn't apply, I think, like Randy said, to the top 10 firms, but for everybody else, the 35,000 other CPA firms and the hundreds of thousands of accountants, whether they're CPAs, internal auditors, or CMAs or whatever, but that we are compliance-oriented people. And yet we know the opportunity is anywhere. It's certainly there, but it's not where the opportunity is leading us. So we have to figure out a way to change our brand. So that belief that's held by the people that hire us, internal or external audit, we have to morph that somehow. And it's a daunting project. So we found that out with a lot of empirical data. I think we all suspected that. So that's something I wish we could figure out how to fix. And that probably would also change perceptions maybe of those entering the profession, because we'd start doing more work. That
is such a great question, how we brand the profession, Anthony. I have asked that as a standalone topic of conversation in some of these other panels. And whose responsibility is it to brand the profession? And if I gave you an unlimited marketing budget, how would you go about repositioning the profession to attract back in this new generation coming through who are looking at accounting as an undesirable career choice, and even leaching out of accounting and going into industry and tech and other areas? So there's a lot going on with the brand, but not for right now. Mark, do you want to bust a myth for us today? What's on your heart?
Oh, no, I've got a solution to your problem. So
How about it?
What you need to do is, you've got unlimited funds, create a Netflix series that's to CPAs what Suits was for lawyers, create Harvey Specter's equivalent as a CPA, and glamorize the whole profession in some way. But I think, in all seriousness,
we need someone to play Meghan Markle, I think, in that one, Mark, as well, don't we?
I'll avoid that topic carefully as a Brit. But what we need to do, we've heard some of it already in this conversation as well. One thing we need to be mindful of, we're stereotyping what accountants are. I'm an accountant. I'm not introverted. I don't consider myself somebody who would sit down at a laptop and be very insular. I get out there, I meet those people. We've got other people on this podcast who I'm sure have similar experiences. So we need to be careful not to paint our own picture here, in the sense of we attract what we talk about, and we should talk about accountants being really energetic, being enthusiastic, being really proud to be CPAs and accountants, because I am and others should be. And so we need to set that tone as leaders in the profession to really demonstrate that accounting is exciting and is an attractive career. I think that's one myth that we need to kind of bust and we need to correct here, is that accountants can be exciting. The other thing I'd be mindful to try and bust as well, and this is obviously quite pertinent to what we do, is this whole concept that change is hard and accountants don't like change, and that kind of stereotype that, we just do the same thing year after year, right? It's an audit, it's a tax return, whatever. Like, this is something that we need to break, because change is only hard for the unprepared. Change is exciting if the change that you're moving to is way better than the way that you're currently working. And most people in accounting firms don't want to keep working exactly as they are right now. So as leaders, we need to tell the story, set the vision, show what accounting firms could look like if they embraced all of the opportunity that's in front of them. But let's stop change management being the problem that stops us doing things, because if we actually really lean into that and get excited about it, everybody's going to want to change. Why wouldn't you want to change? So that's my take on the myths that I would love to see busted here, Rob.
Yeah, and perhaps the responsibility for branding the professional lies with the professionals themselves that need to tell a better story about what's going on and the difference that they make and the lives that they impact and how varied a life in accounting can be.
Well, currently we let journalists cover what accountants do by basically critiquing every single audit failure that there is and going, well, what were the accountants doing? Well, how many news articles have we seen the FT write about the audits where somebody did catch these problems and did report it and did fix it? Well, none, because that stuff doesn't get covered.
No.
But how do we cover that? How do we tell the story of the really critical role that accountants and auditors and CPAs are doing in the profession? Because we've already touched on it earlier on. When COVID hit, who did everybody look to come and help them keep their business afloat?
Yeah.
Who was it? It was the accountants. And did we get all of the goodwill that we should have done for the work that we did in that area? Did we? Heck.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to give you one wish. I've just put it in the Zoom chat, the next question coming up. And Randy, let's kick off with you on this one. So I'm giving you a magic wand. The genie's out of the bottle. If you could change one thing overnight, what would it be?
Well, I think I just alluded to it on the last one. It's the change the way we price our projects, the way we price the what we're delivering to our clients. That billable hour. What
would that look like?
So for me, it's value. It's what have I delivered? What was the outcome? What did this client get out of it? If you look at Ron Baker, it's subscription pricing. I still don't completely understand how that works, but I know he's very passionate about it, and I love Ron. So, but for me, it's just the outcomes. I said it before, based on what I'm delivering.
Yeah.
And I know people freak out about, well, how do I know if I'm profitable on this project or that project? Believe me, we're all smart people. We can figure out what's the bottom line at the end of the month, the end of the week, the end of the year. You know where you made a little more or a little less. You can adjust those prices in the future. It doesn't have to be based on hours. So my biggest wish is to get rid of time tracking. Let's eliminate it completely.
It might just solve a lot of problems. Anthony, what about you? Would you bring 2035 to now, given your vision document? What would you wish for?
Oh my gosh. Well, I certainly wish internal auditors and external auditors would figure out how to work more productively together. That's one I have to say, because that came out loud and clear. If I were looking at the United States, I sure hope we can get past this whole debate about whether you need 120 hours or 150 hours and what constitutes the right experience, without casting an opinion on that debate, because it's an endless discussion. But until we figure that out, we're going to have a problem. And right now, that feels like the most pressing problem that I would wave a magic wand on to fix. And it could be some of the things Mark said. We aren't seen as sexy. I have two 13-year-old daughters. I've never heard them say, I want to grow up to be an internal auditor, an external auditor, an accountant, but I sure have heard lawyer, doctor, just about everything else. But and here their dad is doing this every day, and they have to come and listen to me talk sometimes. They love that. So we have to figure out what's happening, and some of that is right in front of us. Like we're watching our profession become less and less attractive, and we seem to be debating just very narrow things like how many college classes do you need to take, and it's probably some of that. But there's something else going on, but I wish we could solve that. Then we would have enough talent to start meeting all these amazing opportunities that lay in front of us, whether we're internal, external, or whatever kind of accountant or auditor you are. So that might have been a big magic wand wish, but that would be what I would do, would ask for.
No limits on a wish. Mark, genie's out of the bottle. What have you got for us?
Get rid of all desktop software.
There you go.
And it's somewhat self-serving, but it's quite eye-opening and quite concerning that we bring people into this profession who have been brought up on mobile phones and the digital era, and the first experience they get working in a CPA firm is working on software which was designed in the 1990s and had to protect itself from the millennium bug, which none of them even understand what that even was. So what we need to do is really to unlock the opportunity and the potential of technology and all of the really exciting digital transformation opportunities that are available. All of them are completely stopped if you're on legacy, old school desktop technology. So across the board, if you're giving me one wish, I'd just get rid of the whole desktop era, move everyone into the cloud, get them over that hurdle, and then unlock their capacity to really put their foot on the gas and move their businesses forward.
Thank you, Mark. This is what scares me a little bit about the profession. There was a stat came out recently from Zero that said only 30% of accountants automate a bank feed to get that real-time data. That means 60, 70% are not. And they're still in Excel spreadsheets and catching up and syncing everything up. What hope have we got for getting everyone in the cloud and digitizing the profession with that?
We had some feedback from one customer recently, and the feedback was, it's just nice to be working in some software that was designed this millennium.
Yes. Okay. Maybe we're shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit. I see you've rebranded yourself Dr. Phil from Philip Whitman. So what's your one wish?
I was wondering if you were going to notice that.
It's not really protocol on our show, but I'm going to let you get away with it because of who you are.
Thank you so much. So Doctor of Divinity here. But in any event, I think the one wish I would have, maybe a little bit self-serving, is I'd like to see some of the new private equity backed firms have a successful first turn, even though there are several that have already done that. Nobody thinks of them as CPA firms, like the A-Lines and the Shellmans of the world that were private equity backed long before Eisner Amper. But I think what this will do, this will allow so many of the firms that are sitting on the sidelines that really don't have a succession plan, and the white knight will come riding in mass, capitalize these firms so that they could use products like inflow and have an acceptable level of capitalization. So you don't see partners not making investments because in order to do it right now, they have to take it out of their own pocket. So I think a couple of successful turns would be an amazing thing for our profession.
Yeah. We've certainly laid out a lot of the challenges and some of the solutions, things we would like to see happen, things that might never happen. But I'm going to ask you to get your crystal ball out now, fellas, and look ahead however far you like, and come up with one top prediction, a surefire prediction, a bold prediction, something you are absolutely 100% sure is going to happen, as specifically as you can. So, Anthony, I'm going to send you into the casino first on this one with $1 million to put on black or red or some surefire bet that is absolutely going to come true. What do you reckon?
Vegas always intimidates me, but I'll go for it. I think one of the things I've seen, I think at least I've seen two of the big four firms where they have figured out how to find talent that aren't necessarily accountants. And I was very impressed at how they bring in people with liberal arts degrees or engineering degrees or mathematics degrees, and they will train them how to audit and actually have staggeringly good results with those people. So I think we're going to have to embrace an entry into the profession that resembles something more like that. And I mentioned 80% of our members are accountants. Well, that leaves 20% that are doing the exact same work that aren't. And we see a lot of our members coming from mathematics, economics, finance, but not accounting backgrounds. And then they learn or they're taught how to do the work that's needed. With this talent shortage, even if we were to start minting thousands and thousands more tomorrow, new CPAs, I think we're still going to have a problem because there's too much work. that's still outside of the financial statement space. And I met with a member of Congress, actually a senator, and we were talking about ESG. So talking about ESG and how the profession, internal audit and external audit, have a role in helping that legislation be effective, however it rolls out. And she said to me, don't worry, there's more than enough work here to go around to everybody. And I thought about that. I'm like, we're going to have to figure this out, or we won't be one of those professions that's going to be grabbing some of this work and changing who we are, our DNA, for the better. So I think embracing more diverse backgrounds, and that doesn't mean we don't want to keep minting CPAs as much as we can, but I don't think internal audit shops are going to survive if we don't figure out how to use the talent we have right now. Very educated, very intelligent people that can be taught some of the things that we kind of think of holy grail. You have to learn it in college. So that's one crystal ball prediction, maybe a couple in there.
I'm just thinking about the whole ESG thing. Accountants are so well placed to be the guardians of that whole initiative. They are the custodians of data. They're in prime position, but it's just another thing for them to be wrestling with and keeping up to date with all the tax regulation and everything else. I just wonder if they will grasp that in a trusted advisor status, or whether that will fall in someone else's lap by default in the end. I'm not sure, but it's a good prediction. Mark, what have you got for us? What's going to happen?
More firms will get rid of the partnership model and will move to the corporate leadership model. And that'll be driven by two factors. One, directly that private equity firms move firms to that model and get rid of the partnership model. But secondly, the firms that are going to remain independent are going to need to be more agile and be more decisive to be able to compete with the private equity-backed firms. And that will push more firms to a corporate structure, CEO, COO type structure.
It came out on another panel, funny you should say that, Mark. Someone answered their own question. They said, what is private equity looking for in accounting firms? Well, private equity by design looks at things that are inefficiently run and sees that they can make big improvements. Now, accounting firms must have some flaws in their models that private equity see can be improved and made more profitable. And if we thought, to Phil's point, of being more entrepreneurial and running like businesses, then we may not be giving private equity much to improve on. But there's still a lot of appetite, isn't there, for jumping into accounting firms and even vendors, software vendors more.
And the whole profession in general, if you compare it to other industries, has been slow to adopt digital transformation. And so if you look at it and you pump investment into an accounting firm, you can make it leap from its current situation to a much more future ready state by simply adopting the technologies that are already there and just aren't being adopted. You don't need to come in and make a profound investment. You just need to make some investments in this. So if you compare that to, say, the banking sector or utilities or other places, they have adopted digital transformation quicker. And therefore, if you're a private equity house and you're horizon scanning, you're looking for a profession where there's a big gap between technology capabilities and technology adoption. And there you have it. That's why people are excited about accounting firms. There's a lot of synergy to be gained.
Yeah. Phil, what would you put the Whitman mansion on that's definitely going to happen? A surefire bet you put the house on.
So it's very much in line what you and Mark were just chatting about. The whole reason private equity has come into this space, the low cost of entry. I think we're going to see a shift from being an accounting firm or a CPA firm to a multidisciplinary firm. I think what private equity sees is this potential hub and spoke model. Unlike a veterinary or HVAC roll-up in the CPA firm arena, the end client, there's so many other things that could be sold to them. And if you look at that entrepreneurial CPA firm, as long as we're not doing a test services for a particular client, go down their P&L and look at what they're spending money on. And every one of those things, as the trusted advisor, they will start buying from you. Things, beginning of wealth management, HR consulting, technology consulting, just go down the line. I think for every dollar of non-attest CPA firm revenues, there's $8 to $10 of additional revenue that could be generated from that client. I think that's what private equity sees. I think there's a whole ecosystem that's going to be built around the end client of the CPA firm.
That is bold. Thank you. Randy, what are you seeing coming up?
Well, everybody took my idea. So I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to go, and this is again a passion of mine. I'm going to go with, because I agree, the business model needs to change. It's going to change. It is changing. I see the management structures changing, maybe more flat. I'm not going to get into that, even though I just did. What I am going to say is we're going to start to see the profession, we're good at process, procedures, KPIs. I think we're going to start looking more at the staff and the well-being of the staff and the mental health and the burnout. And we're going to start to track that more. We're going to have we're going to have procedures in place where we can see the well-being of the people that we work with and start valuing those people. And I think if we do that, going back to many things we've said already, this whole, hey, let's same as last year, we just do this, we have to work this many hours. I think if we start tracking this and we start looking at productivity rather than the hour, going back to that as well, but rather than that, looking at productivity, looking at staff well-being, and we're going to see a correlation between, hey, we can work less, get more work done, be more efficient, have a better work-life balance, have a better mental outlook on the profession, and just in general, by prioritizing the well-being of our people. And so I think we're going to have models in place that are going to start doing that. We're going to start making that a major emphasis internally in firms. And I'm seeing we as a firm do that. And I'm seeing more firms start to do that. I think you're going to see a big increase on the importance of the people you work with and their well-being, and starting to actually track that and then model that towards profitability and client satisfaction and all of these other things that I think are going to make us successful.
And not just accounting, but any sectors, any employers that do not prioritize employee well-being and mental health in the crazy times that we're in, they're going to become obsolete. They're not going to be able to hire. Nobody will stay with them. They're going to leach out.
Well, and Phil alluded to it before. I mean, when we look at the culture of a firm, I think creating a great culture is the base for everything for your firm. I believe that. But you can actually have a great firm with a bad culture. And in my opinion, Big Four does that, because you're going to work 8 hours a week. You're going to burn people out, but you're going to make a lot of money. And in 2 years, you as an employee, most are going to leave, but they know that. And so they built a culture of burnout. I just don't think that's the future. I don't think we can continue to do that. No. And so that's why culture is important.
Well, let's wrap up here, fellas, and finish on a message of hope. Yes, certainly we've righted some wrongs. We've looked ahead. We've commented on what's going well and what the opportunities are. There are certainly challenges coming up for the profession. But let's start with you, Phil. Why should we be excited and positive about the future of accounting?
So I think there's never been a better time to be a CPA firm or a CPA. When you look at the rate at which we're changing in the past, even if you look at from COVID to today, it probably propelled us easily 20, 30 years ahead of where we would have been. I mean, when you think, I was on a phone with a managing partner this morning, and he told me, I have 48 people working in different states. They never come into the office. I just think that the flexibility that's there, I think what every CPA firm partner, senior manager, principal, director, what they need to do, they need to make what goes on in the day, dinner table conversation with their kids, with their 14-year-old daughters sitting around, why it's so exciting. Because that's why I came into public accounting. My father was a partner at Price Waterhouse, and he told me who he went to lunch with and where he went. And, and to me, it was just exciting. I don't think that happens. We need to not abdicate to the AICPA, the job of making accounting exciting for everyone. We need to do it ourselves, because there's no profession like this. When you think of the exposure you get to all types of businesses, even if you don't stay in it for the long run, it sets you up for life. To be a COO, to be a CEO, to be a CFO. I mean, it's just a phenomenal, phenomenal career, phenomenal foundation.
Yeah.
And it's our job to make sure people know about that.
Randy, what about you? How would you finish with a message of hope? Phil set you up nicely there.
Oh, so Phil just gave me goosebumps. So how can I beat that? But oh, this is not a competition. So yes, so many positive things happen in this profession. I'm so lucky that I get to, hang out with the top 400 firms, and I get to hang out with $2 million firms, and I get to see all the cool things that all these different firms are doing from like an innovation standpoint. Technology coming in, AI, whatever it is coming in, relying on innovation just frees up us as these, high brain power advisors that have passion for a certain thing to go out and do that thing we're passionate about. And the skill sets that are needed in this profession, I think Anthony said it, it's just immense. It's not just a number. People look at accountants, we're just numbers people. No, we are so much more than that. And so just the ability for somebody with a econ degree, or even somebody with a writing degree or something, to come in and have a positive impact on this profession. There's so many opportunities. It's not just I have to put numbers into a computer and see what's popped out. So the flexibility, the automation, the specialized skills, and going back to my passion, the concentration on work-life balance and mental health, I think, is just going to continue to increase. So it's such an awesome time to come into this profession that I'm going to go back in time and I'm going to start over again.
Mark, good time to be in this game?
Yes, Rob. And while we've talked here about a lot of the things that we want to improve about accounting and the challenges that we're facing, the reality is that accounting firms have never made as much money as they're making right now. They are making record profits, revenue levels, etc. So we're in a position where if we want to take advantage of the many opportunities that are in front of us, we have the resources to take advantage of those. If we want to solve some of the challenges that we face, we have the ability to solve those. So I think it's really exciting. It's really exciting for the leaders of accounting firms. And the big thing and the big challenge to those leaders is going to be make sure it's as exciting for everybody else that's involved in this profession as it is for those who are leading these firms.
Yeah, thank you. Anthony, I've deliberately left the last word to you here, President and CEO of the Institute of Internal Auditors. You serve one slice of the profession, but I know you have oversight over accounting generally, and you're not ignorant of what is going on across the whole scope. What makes you so excited about the future?
Yeah, if I was still at the AICPA or Cal CPA, certainly at the Institute of Internal Auditors, I don't think I've ever seen a moment. We've always said this, so maybe the future just gets better, but I don't think I've ever seen a moment where we are seeing such opportunity open up. And we were talking earlier about how do we make this profession sexy? And there is so much on the horizon that actually really is sexy from the perspective of a college student. I don't know if Randy, you mentioned, like, where else do you see an entire organization on your first day looking down and seeing everything that's going on? And now we have ESG and artificial intelligence and blockchain and cryptocurrency. And although that may be confusing and, mind-blowing to someone like me at 57 years old, but imagine a 22-year-old and they're trying to make a decision about a career, and they get to look at all those topics. And they probably do look at that with a very different lens than maybe more mature members of the profession would. So I think there's been no better time, because what's in front of us is pretty amazing. It's inspirational, but it's also exciting. I mean, I would love to be out there at 22 again, knowing that I'm going to be looking at artificial intelligence. I'll be looking at sustainability reporting or governance issues that include cyber. I think that's very different than what I learned, fund accounting, accounting 1, 2, 3, advanced accounting, et cetera. And those are still there to stay. But this new stuff is really awesome. It really is a great career path for anybody going in. We just have to figure out how to increase our numbers.
Well, that's a great way to finish. We need to tell a better story. You guys are such passionate advocates of the profession. You continue to be so. If we had more people like you shouting it from the rooftops that this is the game to play for the younger generation, then there is hope yet. Thank you all so much for your passion and your insights today. That's been world class.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.